Okay, so I've got some Mikuni carbs off my 400 Super Sport, and I'm just putting them back together today. I gave them a good clean last weekend, and so I thought I'd do a video, show you how I do it and little points that might be of interest. One thing I haven't pulled out is the overrun valves on the end here. Now these overrun valves work when there's high manifold vacuum. It pulls a diaphragm in here open and introduces excess fuel into the manifold, which then goes through into the exhaust and it stops it backfiring. That's the only reason these valves are here, is to stop backfiring on the overrun. Years ago I was told that these, if they wear, can lead to them running rich on cruise, but we later realised that was worn needle jets and not these things. Generally they don't give any issues, although I had a 750 SS recently that had a really consistent running rich on one cylinder issue. In the end I replaced this with a new one and it seemed to fix it, although I'm not really convinced it was the actual problem, but it worked and the bike went away, and that was good because it had been an absolute nightmare up to that point. So a little overrun valve, the vacuum just pulls this diaphragm open against the big spring. If you don't put the big spring in, you'd have a problem. It'd run rich often. So the one for the horizontal carb is between the two carbs, and it's a lot harder to get to. And generally they don't really require any maintenance as such. The choke valves are up here, and you can see this little hole in the top here is where the choke air goes in. If you pull the thing across, you can see those valves opening. Just got to make sure they're all clear. I've never really had a choke valve play up that I can recall, so it's not a big deal. The air for the chokes gets sucked through under the diaphragm, so it basically comes in these two hoses here, which is the two hoses with the big plastic filters on them, which is just basically the vents under the diaphragm, but they also do supply all the air for the choke circuits. That's all. Okay, onto the bottom of the carbs, where all the bits go. The first thing I'm going to put back in is these plugs, which people probably wouldn't normally pull out. The O-rings that go around these plugs aren't a Ducati part, you can't buy it new, but it's just an 8 by 1.5 mil O-ring. They can be quite hard to get in. You sort of need to put in, you'll see it's got a flat on one side and it corresponds to the flat then in the carb. So pop that in. That went in quite easily. Make sure they're pushed all the way home. The reason these plugs are here is because all the idle outlet drillings are from there. The 3 holes you can see there are the idle outlets, which come up just in here. So it's just one of those things I often pull out and replace just in case there's an issue. If you want to get them really clean, you pull these out, but you need to make sure you have a new O-ring, and they can be quite troublesome to get back in. Neither of these ones have been, which makes me a little suspicious, frankly. Make sure they're all the way in. Okay, the next thing I'll put in is the jet carriers, which is this part. All these gaskets I'm using you can buy new from Ducati, and they're quite reasonably priced, except for the O-ring that goes on this plug and another O-ring that goes under the slide guide, which I'll show you later. I'll show you right now actually, because you have to do it. This O-ring is just a 10 by 1.5 and it goes on top of the slide guide there. And this O-ring sits other side of the carb down in here. get the pointer down here. And if that O-ring is missing or it's not placed correctly, they will just suck fuel up around it and out into the throat here. And you can see a huge amount of fuel coming out. If you can, that's, I'll pull it out first. That's the O-ring missing. Brand new needle jets. These are just genuine Ducati needle jets. Being a 400, this is a bit wacky in its jetting, and the actual needle jets that they spec'd for them you can't buy anymore. They did have a Y8. This is a Y6 out of a 750 SS. Most other things tend to use a Y2 needle jet. Some things use the Y4. Okay, so back upside down. You just place this on, there's a slot in the side, and it corresponds with that little pin there. So pop him on, slide him down. And there you go. There's this little cap that goes on, and this little 6mm screw, a 6mm head screw that goes in. Be a bit gentle on this because it can break. I'm told I've never seen one break, but you can break them. Okay, now for the jets. The jet holders have 3 jets. This screw-in one is often called a main jet or an air jet in some of the parts diagrams. It's the choke jet. So that's the jet that supplies the fuel for the choke circuit. This is the main jet, which in these carbs is a push-in jet. It has a little O-ring around it. That one there. In this instance, I'm putting a 127.5 in. The really early 400 SS's originally had a 140 main, which I don't really understand, but they also have a quite soft slide spring, and I'm a little bit concerned that with the soft slide spring, it may need a 140 because it'll be open earlier than it would otherwise be. So I just push the main jet in, like so. And now there's this cap and the choke jet, and they hold the main jet in place. And you'll see that, yep, when I put it in the right place. Actually, before I do that, I'll put the pilot jet in. These are the pilot jets. I sometimes spray a little HHHS 2000, which is just a little fairly light lubricant on them. So the pilot jet goes down the hole, and then you just screw it in. Screwdriver's cut down for the purpose. I think the main jet's a bit rounded out. Sorry, the pilot jet's a bit rounded out in the end of the slots. Okay, so now that's in, we'll put the main jet retainer on, and then quick spray, the choke jet. Okay, so that's a choke jet in. The next thing to put in is the float valve, or needle and seat float assembly. Some people set the float levels as they go. I tend to use the fuel height measurement that you do at the end of the job. I tend not to use any sort of float measurement. I've never really seen any that actually need to be adjusted, and I don't use float measurement as a tuning variable on these. And you can see they'll just sort of sit. If you want to test your needles and seats to see if they leak, a vacuum test is often the best way to do that. Little Mighty Vac is what I usually use. These are fine. Okay, and so that's everything in there. Now the float bowl has to go on. Just a quick rundown on what all these passages do. If we get the jet holder and have a look. This one here comes into here, and it supplies the fuel to the bottom of the main jet. And you can see there's a tube in there that forces the air down and around, and so the air comes in just above the main jet and sucks the fuel up that way. This small one here is for the pilot jet. Now both these ones go out to pressed in jets. Maybe the pilot ones are screw in. These two here are air supplies. That's the main and that's the pilot. And that's what those two ones are there. So make sure all these passages are clear. This one is for the choke circuit, and the choke sucks its fuel up through here, which comes out and into this brass tube up to the top. Bit of a clumsy way to do it, but I guess they'd run out of internal passages. So just got to make sure all those passages are nice and clear before you put them together. Get some good carb cleaner into them. Okay, the next thing I'm going to put in is the idle mixture screw. Just need to make sure these are nice and clean. I put a good dose of anti-seize on the threads. I have seen a few of these over the years seized in. I've seen some really, really bad repairs or attempts to get them out as well. So just be really careful. Lubing them up now is the best way to do it. Spring. Then there's a little washer. And finally, a tiny little O-ring that goes on the end. And I usually put a bit of grease around that end as well, around the O-ring. And then pop it in the hole and wind it in. Being a 400, I'd probably start at about 3 turns out. If it's a 900, start about 4, see where you go from there. So half, 1, half, 2, half, 3. That'll do for a start. We'll deal with that again later. Float bowl gaskets. Pretty straightforward. To get them in, these sort of go really flat over time and they can often stick in there. Okay, so when you put this on, you just need to hook the little tube under the float so it doesn't grab anything, and sort of between the float and the idle mixture screw tower. And there we go, that's on. Now I just need to find the screws that I choose to use.